we were talking about the quilt making group, something that we just kind of suggested on a whim. And we realized that members of the congregation were thinking about doing something like this for years, but just never really had the impetus or never really had the reason to do it. But if we integrated that into the Friedenshaus program, where participants of the language classes could come, and if you had sewing skills, you could use those. We could make it a nice sort of quality time where we have tea and talk a lot. That really took off. And that's something that's still going to this day, which is wonderful to see. Youth from the congregation, we have a couple of families with youth there, would come regularly and offer homework help during these quilting evenings, and that's still something that's going on today. So there have been some changes. There have been, a pandemic has come in between, but through it all, the goal has remained not just to offer practical help, but to create a community that reflects something of God's love and the blessing that shines through the midst of unusual encounters. So for me personally, there has been a huge element of serendipity about the Peace House. It's a space born out of chance encounters and often very shaky funding structures and the right people stepping in at the right time. But somehow it's persisted, it's still here, and I feel very blessed to have been involved in it and to be able to pass it down to successor coordinators, who you'll be hearing from now.
Thank you so much, Greg. Thank you for working that and for your sharing today. So the next coordinator of the Friedenshaus was Sylvie Croker. I would like to offer Sylvie a special congratulation today. Today is her birthday. Happy birthday, Sylvie. Everyone wave Sylvie a happy birthday, please. Thank you so much for taking time while your family is here and on the evening of your birthday to tell us about your time in the Friedenshaus. We're very grateful. Sylvie was coordinator when I first came on as volunteer. She is a Mennonite from Winnipeg, Canada. She has lived in Europe since 2015 and served as the coordinator of the Friedenshaus, the Peace House, again, Frieden is peace in German, from 2018 to 2021. She currently works in Helsinki, Finland, at an organization that promotes the well-being of intercultural families in Finland. We look forward to hearing from you today, Sylvie.
Thanks, David, and thanks everyone for the birthday wishes. It's, great to be here. This is actually my first time at a Mennonite World Conference thing. I was at the European version and a peace conference before, but happy to be at my first World Conference in this different mode. So I'm Sylvie. As David said, I was the coordinator of the Peace House from fall 2018 until spring 2021. And largely we continued the work that Greg and his wife Jen had started. But with different people and a few different things, but largely we continued. And I'm going to share some stories and some of my thoughts about hospitality and the role of guests and hosts in this Friedenshaus ministry, as one of the main goals is bringing people of different backgrounds together and sharing the space and community together. So when I first moved to Germany to start the position, I needed to ask a lot of people for help as I was trying to navigate this new transition. I didn't speak a word of German. I'd never lived in Germany before, so clearly I needed a lot of help. Usually I asked German people for help because that seemed the most logical, the local people from the church. But they, however, were not experts on where one can study German. So I had to seek that information elsewhere. After hearing a conversation about this, one participant from Syria offered to take me to his German school to sign up. And I ended up taking classes there. It was a 3-minute walk from the Friedenshaus and the church, super convenient. So I studied there for about a year and it was great. I learned enough German to get by and even teach a little bit eventually later. And so for me, this experience was the first, it was an eye-opening experience on how my role as a host or coordinator can be fluid. I was a guest also on other occasions, whether in the home of refugees or with assistance in my work at the Friedenshaus. And it was my impression and my belief that this alteration of our space and expected roles strengthened our relationship and allowed us better to live in community. Because when I took on the role of coordinator, I thought I would be the one hosting people and serving them, but I also learned so much from the participants and experienced such hospitality from them as well. And now I'd like to share a couple of pictures. Oh, it's disabled.
My apologies. I think that should work now. I'm
you.
sorry.
Yeah. So can you see, this is a photo from one of our potlucks. Greg mentioned that, we had a lot of potlucks. So this was in the church building. I guess this was around Christmas. You can see a Christmas tree in the back. And people brought German food or food from Syria or the other countries. And that was, a really great way to experience community together and talk over food. And this is a photo from one of our conversation classes. We had also informal German classes where we just chatted with each other. The woman on the left is from the church, and she helped us all improve our German and learn about German culture. How do I stop this now? Okay, great, thanks. Yes. So in addition to hosting people at the church, I was also invited into the homes of refugees on many occasions. And each time I was astounded by the warmth and hospitality and the resilience that they showed, despite, in many cases, horrific experiences and journeys to Germany. Even when we had language classes and these potlucks, as I showed, the participants were such generous guests that they seemed to me like they were the hosts. They helped with setting up the tables, cleaning up, making coffee. They brought food, and they went above and beyond what a typical guest in my mind would do. And so this, transition and fluidity between the roles of host and guest, especially in a church ministry setting, also really made me think about my own faith and work in a different way, as it was a tangible experience for me of the kind of hospitality that I believe Jesus calls us to. I also really enjoyed the experience of being able to welcome people from diverse cultures and religions into the church. And many of the participants expressed to me that they were more comfortable at the Friedenshaus than other welcome centers, because the people at the Friedenshaus understand the importance of religion. And so in order to understand each other's faith and traditions better, I organized some religious discussion events. So we began by sharing a potluck meal together, and then after that, we would discuss around a theme. And the first theme that we discussed was fasting. And so we held it between Easter and Ramadan. And this was a really helpful experience for me, and I think also the Germans from the church, to understand why fasting in Ramadan is so important to the Muslims. So it was a great way for people to share their experiences and these traditions that that are important to them. I also bonded a lot with the participants over our shared struggle of learning German language and our confusion with some aspects of life in Germany. And I was there also when the pandemic started, and then we were like bonded in a way also by our inability to visit home. I'm from Canada and I wasn't able to then travel to Canada. And even though it was temporary for me, it still really helped me to empathize more with the refugee experience. And when I was expressing my sadness, frustration, whatever, about not being able to see my family, I was again astounded by the support and sympathy I received from these refugee participants who were also unable to visit home. And when I was finally able to visit my husband in Finland and I had to quarantine when I went back to Germany, then they brought me food while I was in quarantine and were always calling to make sure I was okay, which was so sweet of them. So in closing, I just like to emphasize that, yeah, I learned so much about hospitality and how to welcome and support others. And I went to Germany. I thought I was going to be the one hosting and supporting people, but instead I was shown also such hospitality by other newcomers that I was also a guest in their space.
Thank you, Sylvie.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. There's a circle of 5 to 10 cool Syrian guys who are all good friends with Sylvie and I, and we've had many good times, and especially Sylvie over that time. And thank you for sharing with us about it. On that theme of sort of passing on, I guess, sort of hospitality or hospitality as sort of a circle, I wanted to share a story a little bit about another volunteer at the Friedenshaus, Heidi Zawatzki. I asked her if I could share some parts about her story with you all today, and she very happily affirmed that. I mentioned her earlier. She helps the refugees with paperwork, and she's been doing this for a long time, so she knows the ins and outs of all kinds of different German forms, which is a huge job. Those of us who've lived in Germany as migrants can report that ourselves as well. And it's, of course, far more difficult for people coming from an Arabic language background and bureaucratic culture and all that. And Heidi is, a massive help. And she's someone who's on their side in a different way than how social workers or government officials are on their side. So it's a really beautiful thing, what she's been doing regularly for, I don't know, 5 years, many years. She's made a wonderful contribution there. And she, to the outside observer, would seem to be a very typical German Mennonite woman. She, speaks fluent German and comes from a German background and grew up in Germany. But in fact, her family were also refugees who came from former Yugoslavia. Her family was very intimately hit with death during the Second World War, and they came from former Yugoslavia to Germany. Much of her family stayed behind in Yugoslavia and then again experienced refugeehood and this experience of dislocation and then of hospitality, of new growth, of starting something new in Germany in the 90s. Among her cousins are Protestants, herself as a Mennonite, Catholics, Orthodox, and Muslims coming out of the Yugoslav context. And she loves to share with the participants about this this experience of pluralism and being together with folks with very different stories, which has enriched her life, and she brings that into the conversations with the participants. My favorite, or one of my favorite experiences with her, one time her daughter and grandson came into the Friedenshaus, and her grandson was this little 5-year-old blonde boy, and he came running in and he said, "Hello, and then he said his name, and then he said, and I'm half Danish, half Croatian." And this was how he introduced himself. He came in and said, "Hello, I'm half Danish, half Croatian." He'd been primed to, know this is an international kind of context. And it was really cute and really cool. So our next speaker will be Mailsa, who we've already seen a little bit in pictures. Mailsa and her husband Hermann Stahl are the present coordinators of the Friedenshaus. They grew up in Paraguay, where their parents and grandparents came as refugees from the former Soviet Union. So continuing some of that theme. Hermann and Mailsa's current home is in Canada. Mailsa is a retired teacher, while Hermann worked as a counselor with children and their parents. They have 2 adult children. During their free time, they love exploring the region and look forward to discovering more of their ancestral roots in Europe. Thank you so much for being with us today, Mailsa, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Well, hello, and thank you for coming, everyone, and for attending. We appreciate your presence here. And I would like to share a little story of one of my participants in the Friedenshaus. I teach a class, and in my class are mainly or only women. And it was one of those days where attendance was low. The attendance is somewhere between 4 and 18. And this time it was only 4 older women. After class, they lingered and the conversation meandered to school attendance. I was particularly interested in one of the women who had been in Germany for 20 years already and was, it seemed like, illiterate. A shy but very kind and gentle soul, she's always one of the first ones there and never leaves without a friendly Dankeschön. She comes from northern Iraq and is one of 2 Kurdish students in the class. That day, it only took a few questions, and in her broken German and with hand gestures, she told her story. While her younger siblings all went to school, this woman and her older sister had to stay at home. Immer Frauen und Kinder arbeiten. Always women and children had to work, while the men would pocket the money. She was motioning as if stuffing something into a shirt pocket. She didn't have any identification papers until she was 17, so officially non-existent. Kurdish people have been persecuted all throughout the Middle East, and perhaps nowhere more so than in Iraq. She shared about the horrors of people being gassed and herded into big holes to be buried alive. Today, mass graves are being unearthed with human remains, including many women and children. Curious as to whether she had ever been back to Iraq, she said that she had visited Kurdistan, but emphatically waved her arms while uttering "Nicht Baghdad, nicht Iraq," not Baghdad, not Iraq. She is a testament of human resilience. Her plight could have easily turned her into a bitter woman, yet, while not without scars, that cloud who she could have been, somehow her smile persists. She and her husband have made a new future possible for her kids and 8 grandchildren. And now we are privileged to assist her in improving her future. And that's the story I wanted to share today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mailsa. I also brought and wanted to share a brief story about loss and new life at the Friedenshaus. One thing that's really spoken to me is this sort of exchange that you all were able to have in this small group. And this has been something that I've experienced and really cherished as well at the Friedenshaus, particularly with a small group or a smaller group of men. And I've noticed that the Friedenshaus is, among other things, a space where people who are carrying heavy burdens, can share, sometimes when they don't have other spaces to share in life. In two cases in particular, men who I met with and talked to a lot at the Friedenshaus have shared, about really difficult family burdens. One about health difficulties in family, and one person talking about being unable to bring family across the sea, despite living in Germany for over 2 years and having a visa and having a job and all of this. These private conversations at the Friedenshaus were spaces in which people were able to share, to cry, and I hope to be comforted. And for me, having this space together where we got to know each other over many hours of conversation and learning and sharing with a focus toward care is a really special thing. As Greg said to me when we were discussing these stories one time, this kind of thing doesn't happen in a normal German class. And I think that summarizes it well. Our next speaker today will be Hermann. I've really enjoyed teaching grammar with Hermann, and have found him to be a capable and attentive teacher, and most importantly, a capable and attentive person with the participants. He really cares for them and engages them in conversations, both humorous and deep. He'll be sharing today about hospitality as well. Thank you, Hermann, and welcome. We look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, also good to be here and to be in Germany. We are really enjoying being here. I wanted to pick up a little bit from chronologically from where Sylvie left off. So Sylvie had the really difficult task of coordinating things at the Friedenshaus during the pandemic. And when we came, it was still the pandemic in 2021 in August. But what we figured out is that the German government was giving quite a bit of leeway to educational programs. So we were able to reintroduce, German classes in person. And because so many German classes had been canceled throughout the city, there was just a pent-up need for some assistance and some support in the German, acquiring the German language. So it was quite overwhelming, the response we had, and so it was able to get started quite quickly again. So we were fortunate to be able to do that. Also wanted to return a little bit to that theme of hospitality that Sylvie began before. And one of the big themes with regards to refugees, newcomers, migrants in Germany seems to be the idea of integration. Integration. I know organizations were able to tap into all kinds of funds under that umbrella, and refugees are required to do quite an extensive integration course, which includes language, German history, culture, and so on. However, I think that before a person in a new situation, and especially in a situation that is not of their choosing, can accept or even embrace, what is new, a new culture, a new tradition, or even a new language, in order to be able to do that, she or he needs to feel safe, needs to feel validated, needs to feel affirmed, accepted for who she or he is. Without that, they either lose everything they have, or they just totally resist integration. And this happens, feeling free and feeling accepted happens when a person experiences hospitality. In fact, the role of a host is exactly that. When we host people at our homes for dinner or an evening, for example, we go through great lengths to make them feel comfortable by creating a comfortable atmosphere or relaxed setting, showing interest in their lives and what is happening in their families, by accepting them as we know them. And that is what we are trying to do and accomplish at the Friedenshaus. And as I continue here, I'll just try to share the screen here a little bit and show you some pictures as we move along here. There we go. So we're trying to do this hospitality thing which opens up and helps people to relax And we do that by slowing down to a non-hurried place, to be a non-hurried place in relation to language acquisition, for example. We will stick with a theme, with a concept for as long as we need to, until we feel like, you know, most of the people or all the people are really on board, and we can move on. We take time for conversation, as David has already referred to, during coffee and social events, and we try to learn from them and empower them. And this happens, for example, in our conversation groups, which are part of our language acquisition support. For example, before Ramadan, we gave them an assignment to explain Ramadan to a German person. Partly it was so that they had a chance and we had a chance to learn more about Ramadan, but largely it was with the idea, or what we feel is important, that they will be able to explain what they believe, what they're passionate about, to people around them. And that was an empowering act, empowering them to tell their story and to tell their beliefs and what they're passionate about. And coincidentally, this year, Easter happened in the same month that Ramadan did. And so we planned something that allowed them to experience the religious and cultural, traditions of their new home. And we did a big Easter egg hunt in the park and invited other German speakers to be a part of that, and tried to create an intercultural kind of a setting. Another example of what can happen when this environment of hospitality is created is a conversation that is a story I want to tell you about, a conversation that erupted quite spontaneously at one of our coffee breaks, or actually right after our coffee break. We had come back together to do some learning, and it all started with a woman sharing her experience about how long it took for her to begin to feel accepted in her German neighborhood. She's quite an energetic, friendly woman, and she lives in the neighborhood with a lot of elderly German people. And she talked about how they would cross the street when she would walk down the sidewalk, and trying to avoid her, and she would wave and she would greet friendly, and she would keep at it, and eventually they were beginning to greet her back, but it had taken a long time. And quite quickly, other women especially took up this theme of, okay, this cultural diversity, this cultural difference around head coverings, and try to enlighten the rest of the group, that those of us that aren't Muslim, that, hey, we don't wear those at home. We were dressed quite normally at home. And one of the women said, you know what, actually, somebody asked me if I even had hair under my head covering. And that kind of, they picked up on that ignorance, that cultural ignorance that is there. And that kind of feeds into this media-driven stereotype of Muslims being extremists. And so that became part of the conversation. And then finally, like, one of the women was just eager to go, and she said, the Muslim religion is really a good religion. It's based on 3 main books: the Torah, the Bible, and the Quran. And our life is supposed to be taken from the virtues of these books. And so she kind of explained that a little bit. And then, to kind of wrap up the story or this conversation, one of an older man remembered how his leaders, the religious leaders in his youth years, had told them and warned them, don't ever go into a church, don't even have coffee with a Christian. And then he stopped and he looked around and he says, and now we visit churches quite freely. And in fact, here we are. We're drinking coffee together. and we're learning together. And I think this experience, this conversation, this discussion highlighted for me the importance of acknowledging each other, of mutual respect, and allowing each other to be who we are. And I think until newcomers get this sense of being acknowledged and being respected, they will have a hard time to let down their guard and start feeling comfortable in their new surroundings. Without hospitality, integration just won't happen, or at least not that easily. And I think that is the significant part of what we hope to achieve here at the Friedenshaus, as you already have heard. It's hospitality. And I have some pictures here also of moments of mutual hospitality. So we do coffee every day, or every time we have the courses, we take some time to have coffee and conversation. And sometimes those coffees will go into half an hour or whatever, and we'll have hardly any time left for the second half. But about every 2 or 3 months, we can't have full out potlucks yet, or we couldn't until now, at least, because of the pandemic. But we did sort of in-house potlucks, so to speak, kind of a bigger coffee time where everyone brought something, and you can just see that when they have a chance to bring something, they shine, and they just love to serve you. This man had brought this whole dish and basically fed the whole group, and he was just beaming to be able to share that gift that he had. And so this is kind of what the plates look like in the end, just a variety of very tasty food, which we enjoy in those spaces then.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Herman. Now I'm hungry for dinner, but thank you.
Well, when we have these coffees, we never make dinner those days, I tell you.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, for our last word as a group, we will again be turning it over to Greg. As has been mentioned, there are a million welcoming centers in Germany, or at least there should be. But working out of our faith tradition at the Friedenshaus, we're doing something that's similar, but also different from what many other similar sorts of places are doing. And Greg will be sharing with us just a final reflection on what is this about? What is the character of it? And what's driving us? Thank you, Greg.
Thank you so much, David. And for me, it's really been wonderful hearing from Sylvia and Merles and Hammond and yourself, David, as well. All the work that's happened since we left Ludwigshafen. And it's really just been such a blessing to see this work continue. I think all of you brought it to a point, the sort of character I think that does characterize the Friedenshaus, this idea of hospitality, this getting closer to people in a way that, as you said, really just can't happen in a normal social work context and normal language school context. The whole question of interreligious coexistence, dialogue, has always been a really interesting part. Obviously, not all of the participants of the Friedenshaus are Muslim, but the vast majority are, and it's been that way since the beginning. I remember when we started, members of, for example, just the Ludwigshafen greater community would look at us sort of askance as a project. What is this church trying to do? Especially because most free churches in Germany do have the reputation of being very evangelical, sort of very missionizing. Were we using this opportunity, this refugee situation, to sort of further our own kind of missioning agenda or to make converts? On the other hand, when we were giving presentations to churches, they'd almost look at it from the other way. What were we doing this kind of community project when really this was maybe a chance to open relationships and invite people to faith courses and sort of deepen that commitment to introducing the Christian faith. So from the very beginning, that was always an interesting tension within the Friedenshaus. I think my sort of reaction or my answer to that was really the project that we were doing is just what came naturally to us, to the congregation, and to the participants. I think we found sort of an equilibrium that was aligned with the values, but still allowed this something special to shine through. It's interesting how people feel comfortable, and I do want to try, I'm sorry that it didn't work before, but I do want to try to share my screen and show just a final round of pictures of, again, sort of emphasizing this shared, host has disabled participant screen sharing. Okay, that's fine then.
I re-abled it. I don't know how that happened. I apologize.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So please do bear with me here. I hope that I can get these to share. Okay, are you still seeing the little picture? Yes, you are. Okay, so I'm going to try to get the big one on. I'm sorry that this was working before, but it doesn't seem to be now. If I can transfer this green line. Huh. Okay. Well, I don't want to try to mess around too much with that. In any case, it really just has been a place where people have felt welcome. I think when Sylvia was saying that people were, before courses, going out and getting coffee all by themselves, and really preparing the space where we didn't have to say anything, is just this wonderful feeling of people being at home. This idea of people congregating in a church, as Herman was saying, associating with Christians. I mean, think of how many Christians themselves have, spent significant time in mosques and have felt perfectly comfortable there. It's that same sort of hurdle to get across. So when I think about what is done there, it's just been wonderful. I think that there's one story that a woman, again, hijab, very faithful Muslim, but was talking about the courses that they had visited and the ones that we offer here. And, the courses at the Friedenshaus aren't perfect. They have their problems, but people come here. And her words were, because God is here. There's a sense of God in this place that we don't find elsewhere. I think what she meant was this sort of shared commitment to spirituality, this shared sort of acknowledgement of faith within this place. I took that as the highest compliment that could ever be given to it, because that means that somehow, somewhere, it was accomplishing its purpose of, on the one hand, offering this very practical help, but on the other hand, really, in its own strange way, radiating this kind of spirituality. So I was really happy to hear that. I think in some way we've sort of stumbled on this model of intercultural and interreligious dialogue or coexistence that celebrates and lifts up our commonality in a way that doesn't bring our identities down to the lowest common denominator. It's a way in which they're both shared extremely fully, and we don't feel like we've given up on our own church values. That's just always been the thing that's been the most special about the Friedenshaus to me. And I'm looking forward now to exchange and to hearing about other people's reactions, to hearing about other initiatives that have happened. And so, David, I'll give it back to you then.
Yeah. On that, that's an excellent note to end our contributions thereon. And we would welcome questions, reflections, stories from other congregational initiatives or similar congregational initiatives. I know several of you here have belonged to or belong now to congregations with a strong welcome culture and exchange. You're also welcome to call it a night, call it a day, as needed, but questions or reflections on your own initiatives would be very welcome.
So what do you think was, I mean, of the program? So the kind of the goal is to connect with immigrants and to ease their transition into, so you had the potlucks, you had the language classes. What do you think was the most successful part of the event of the Friedens House?
Maybe I could start with fielding that one. A participant had told me once that he certainly sees the language classes as kind of the bread and butter. It's the need that's there. It's what most people have sort of on their immediate plates. And that kind of brings people in the door, that gets people to get to know it, to feel comfortable. It starts conversations, especially as Herman was talking about during the breaks where you sit around coffee and have those conversations. And yeah, and I think from there, you can start inviting to other things.
So the language classes, we saw mostly women there. So was it mostly, I'm trying to get a sense, I mean, were the men working or did the women work other times, or did they not have jobs, or what allowed them to come in, and why didn't they just take language classes in other, I assume that there were other like public situations in which they would take German classes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for example, in my class, they are mostly mothers with children. And because we are more flexible in other courses, for example, if they miss 3 times, they're out. Here, and that's one of the challenges we also have, is that it's a come and go kind of situation. So then a mother has a baby and then she doesn't come for a couple of months, or children are sick and then they have to stay at home, especially now during the pandemic. Any little sickness, the children have to stay home. And so the mother has to stay home, but they can come back anytime. And so in that sense, it's more of a place, or they feel comfortable coming here. And men very often have jobs already. Yeah, that's right.
And on the other hand, with the child rearing situation, we're also flexible enough to allow women to bring their children. We don't have childcare at the moment, and but we do say to them, if you can come and look after your child, bring some activities for them, when they begin to be a bit of an issue for the class, that they take responsibility for them, then they're welcome to bring the children, which is also not a thing that they can do in other courses. And yes, you're right. There are plenty of courses now, again, that things are opening up or have opened up. There's lots of courses they can go to. One of the issues they have is that the courses go very quickly, and it's understandable. They have a course for a certain level, and they have a certain amount of material that they have to cover in 3 months or whatever the course runs, and it has to go quickly. And for many of them, it just goes way too quickly, and that's why I chose those words before. We try to slow it down so that they can grasp some of the things, and sometimes they also come because the job center or the government is now requiring them to show that they're doing something to integrate. And so they need to show that they're making some kind of effort. So they come and they'll take a course like this. And although they don't get any papers as
And a
in
certificate.
certificates. We do offer to them just a statement saying, yes, they have attended from such a date to such a date, just so that they have paper to show that they're making an effort. But a lot of it has to do with, this is a place where it's slow enough for them and flexible enough for them to be able to attend.
And to speak briefly to the gender balance question, so there's 3 courses right now. There's Magnus's course, and then there's Hermann's course, and then there's a third course. A teacher has begun in the last months and has really thrived. And I mean, I think it's probably 20 to 30 people on a typical day about nowadays between the 3 courses.
Yeah.
Maybe even more sometimes. Yeah. So and the gender balances are different in the different classes, and yeah.
I don't want to dominate, but I have other questions. So here in Southern California, got a lot of immigrants, and they often connect with families, the families that they have, or family connections that they have here. And actually the children of the families who live here are speaking English pretty regularly, and the kids pick up the English pretty quickly that way. I don't even know if the parents are going to pick up English. Sometimes they speak a few words, not that many words, but there's a lot of Spanish in Southern California. So the situation in Germany, in Ludwigshafen, are they at the situation where they're inviting their families up, and are the children beginning to speak more German and kind of integrating that way through the youth?
Mm.
Well, and in the families, I find the children speak Arabic, which is a good thing. But otherwise, with other children in the school or on the street or whatever, they can speak German quite well, like after a short period of time, and they catch on very quickly. And in fact, quite often it's the children that will help translate for the parents.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things we hear, since we're talking about children and family, over and over again, that the parents came for a lot of the parents came for their children. They didn't see a future for their kids, where they were, and so they came over for their children, and so it's very important for them for their kids to get a good education, to get into a good school. They're very proud of that when that happens.
Is there
one thing?
Go ahead.
Just real quick, one thing that your question reminds me of is my supervisor and colleague at the German Mennonite Peace Committee tomorrow is doing a workshop at the same time together, talking about borders, actually, borders and boundaries, but together with a Baptist, actually, but Mennonite, very Mennonite friendly woman in the US who runs a project called Casa de Paz, which means Friedenshaus or House of Peace, and has a similar sort of, exists to welcome and provide lodging and supplies and connect with migrants who are basically just over the US-Mexican border, have just come across the border. And I think there are a lot of parallels between similar hospitality initiatives, and also these parallels like we're naming with how language and culture are learned from generation to generation.
I have one quick question, and that is, what are the numbers roughly of, you've named staff and volunteers and church members, and maybe there's overlap among those, but I'm just curious how many staff and how many volunteers, and what percentage of time are the staff positions?
Yeah, so staff, it is only Morels and I. We're the coordinators. We're employed 3/4 time together. And volunteers, we have, so we have 2, 3 women, David. So there's four volunteers in addition to our, yeah. And one is a woman from this church. One is a sister of that woman who's a Catholic, from a Catholic church, who comes and helps. And one is a retired
person from one of the Mennonite churches here.
Yeah.
And then we have 2 youth that help with homework. We have 2 youth that help with homework.
Whoops.
Oh, something is echoing here.
It's fixed. You can continue.
Yeah, they help with homework, like a homework club. So, but they get paid for that.
They get an honorarium.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And in terms of attendance, it's part of that transient, or that what Marilza was talking about, come and go. Like since September, we've probably served, or there's probably been about 130 to 150 different people that have come. But on any given day, there'll be 20 to 30 in a class. So that shows you a little bit about the flexibility, or the commitment, transience, whatever you want to call it.
Thank you.
Another question. So in France, there's been a lot of alienation of the Arab folks with the French culture, and of course led to Marie Le Pen and so on. So have you experienced any of that in Germany?
David, you're more familiar with the political situation here. Maybe you can take that one.
Well, in Germany, there's a highly to be recommended proportional voting system. So there are kind of 6 parties that people can choose from, and as long as they get a certain share of the vote or a certain number of candidates elected, they can be represented. So that makes it possible for there to be a much fuller spectrum than, say, in the United States, where you kind of have these 2 parties, and if you don't fit in them, it's rough. And there is a far right-wing party similar to Marine Le Pen and her ideology here, and it's about 10% of the population. One thing I've learned living in a small village where most people vote on the left side of the spectrum is that nonetheless, a few people who are really racist can really create terrible problems. For example, for Muslim women who want to be able to go to a pool and swim in a bikini. So 10% can make a lot of problems for a lot of people. You can make someone very sad by saying something very hurtful to them. Yeah, it's certainly not to be underestimated how much of a challenge active racism and cruelty can be to people. But there's also so much welcome here too. Greg talked earlier about the massive challenge of taking in 1 million refugees in a country of 80 million. And a lot of people took that on in Germany, and at the Friedenshaus and in other places, we see all the time, folks, often women who are accompanying, a migrant or a migrant family for years, and keeping up with them and helping them network, helping them connect with resources, helping them with language and culture. So it's really incredible, the love and the support that people in this country have shown for refugees as well.
And the migrants, they feel I mean, in France, it seemed, and maybe I've got this wrong, but it appears that French youth who are Arab are often feel alienated and protest and so on. Do you see that happening in Germany at all? Is there alienation?
Be interesting to hear. I see that we also have a couple of Germans themselves who have signed in who might have a good idea about this. But I think working at the Friedenshaus has also sort of brought home, and of course it's a, you can't, just stereotype a whole group. You can't just say, the people here, and it's a, but I think that is actually really true. Sort of seeing the diversity of people who even come to the church, even from within one cultural group. You'll have some who, are very open to the culture. You'll have some who feel just much more closed off, much more guarded. Between parents and kids, you'll have sometimes a lot of conflict. I think in Germany in general, it's fair to say that there are a lot of people from a minority background, from immigrant youth, that do feel alienated within the culture. I think there's a good part of German culture that can also lead to that. At the same time, a lot of German pop culture has also integrated a lot of these influences as well. So yeah, I think it's a very sort of complicated issue, but I don't know if anybody else has anything to say about that.
I'd like to say something to that. From Germany, from Pisa House or Mennonite Congregation. I think one important factor in Germany for integration of the young people is the school system. And although we have a lot of problems with our school system too, what we don't have is this separation between public and private schools in Germany. Most people are going to public schools and they are tolerably staffed, and children have a chance to have a decent exam and go further with education and university or learning a profession. And that's probably totally different in America. And I don't know about France, if you have this separation between good schools for people with money and bad schools for all the rest. That's something we don't have here. And I think that helps a lot of giving every young people their chance.
Mhm.
So how long has this Arab integration existed? And I just wonder, because here in our context, parents have a set of values that they want to enforce. They want to bring their Mexican or South American culture to Southern California. But then the kids grow up in Southern California, they have a different set of values. And that can lead to a lot of estrangement between the parents and the children. I'm just wondering how that, because kids in Arab children growing up in Germany are going to have a different set of values than their parents. Any thoughts about how that's going, or how long has it been? Because I imagine it takes maybe 5-10 years or so for immigrants to feel that separation with their children.
Well, I can only speak from the point of view of the people that we know here. I've gotten to know here at the Friedenshaus, and you're right. They're relatively new in this new country and a new culture, so that time of that separation, developing that separation, maybe hasn't been there as long. I do find the children still have a lot of respect for their parents and for their culture and for their religion. So from the people that I know or we've gotten to know here at the Friedens House, we don't see that yet, but I have no doubt that's coming for them as well.
I think it's probably true that a lot of people who do attend classes at the Friedens House are in general a little more proactive, a little more sort of open to integration, and especially open to a better future for their children. I know when I was there, a lot of the parents, a big motivation for learning German was because their children were in school and they wanted to be able to understand, help their kids speak with their teachers, sort of know what was going on there. And so I think certainly from our experience, that'll probably slant more towards people who are, come to Germany sort of with open arms and are interested in adapting to the extent that they feel comfortable.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for being with us today, for hearing these stories out of this congregation and this space and this Mennonite conference. I really appreciate this conversation together, and thank you so much to Sylvie and Marisa and Herman and to Greg for your sharing. It was wonderful to get to see you all today, and I'm aware this has been streamed, even though it sadly wasn't possible for me to record it. Hopefully that stream is also preserved somewhere. I wish you all a wonderful World Conference as you take part in further events, and a wonderful summer or possibly winter if there are folks in the Southern Hemisphere. Thank you all so much for being with us today, and God bless. All the best to you.